Hey everybody, welcome to Landscape Rescue. My name's Stuart Moore. Let's do a Lowe shopping video. So I wanted to show you guys some trees real quick. I always try to swing through the trees and see if I can see anything really cool. And I just wanted to comment on a northern red oak for $55. It's in a 7-gallon pot and it's probably, I would say, 6 feet tall. It's not necessarily a bad price. But the northern red oak is a host species to a lot of caterpillars, and caterpillars hatch around the same time that a lot of native bird species are having their babies. So they use those caterpillars as a food source to raise their baby. And I understand that that's not necessarily important to a lot of people because you don't eat caterpillars. They pull carbon out of the air to produce that. And then this falls down to the ground, biodegrades, the circle continues. And things eat these too, like those caterpillars we were talking about. And then the birds eat the caterpillars, and then your house cat eats the bird. See? It's a big cycle. And I would love for you to find this at 50% off. And I would love for you to have enough property where you can plant a northern red oak. These things get big. They kind of have platy bark. I think they're very pretty, definitely beautiful in the fall. Northern red oak for $55, a pretty doggone good deal. And I always like to start plants small. I do like the idea of starting trees in a 7-gallon pot. The smaller you start your tree, the less shock time it's gonna go through. A bald burlap tree, on the other hand, versus a pot grown tree, has had 90 to 95% of its roots pruned off, stuffed in a bag, driven across the country. While it was dormant, it wakes up in its new home with 95% of its support structure gone. So for every inch caliper, expect 1 to 1.5 years of retarded growth, which is a stunted growth state. So it'll be in a stunted growth state for 1.5 years for every inch caliper trunk, right? That's just a way that we can calculate it in the industry. A 7-gallon, 3/4 of an inch or 1/2 inch is most likely going to catch a 2-inch bald and burlapped because it doesn't have to regrow its roots. It hits the ground running. And then with some tree saver or some sort of, beneficial fungal inoculant, some mycorrhizal inoculant, some 2-year fertilizer tablets just to act as supplemental nutrition, not to push any extra growth, something very, very slow release, is gonna help that bounce right back even further. And we've talked about these on the channel before. This is a Ginkgo. I'm just a fan. I like how the leaves look. I like how they make a different sound in the landscape. I think a lot of times, and I've said this before, but I think designers, they forget about sound as one of the senses to incorporate into designs. Awesome, I love these little guys. It's in a 3-gallon pot, $37.98. And I think the reason it's a little higher is because they are very slow growing. You know the old adage, you don't plant a tree for you plant a tree for the next generation. A lot of cultures, especially the Asian culture, has a lot of admiration for the Ginkgo, but a host species for 0. So I wanted to show this to you real quick because I thought this was very interesting and it's kind of a buyer beware situation. So you have a 3-gallon inside this 7. And what they did is they ran out of time to let this grow into the 7-gallon pot. Now ideally you wouldn't be able to tell. Probably during unloading or transit, this got shuffled around. Maybe somebody in their infinite wisdom decided to unload the truck. They grabbed a hold of this trunk and they pulled it out of the pot, but it wasn't grown in very well. And so this probably just got pulled right out of the pot. And a lot of that medium probably just fell into the truck and it was this big thing and blah, 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 blah. Maybe whoever was holding it by the trunk realized that you probably shouldn't unload trees by the trunk if you don't know if they're grown in well or not. This is $79. It's not a spectacular price by any stretch of the imagination. I wouldn't call that a spectacular price, but the fact that it's been pushed out this fast, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily Lowe's fault because Lowe's just purchased a 7-gallon. The nursery that grew this didn't let them know that they're not ready yet. It's kind of one of those deals. They had them out on the pad, they were growing in, an order came in, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Threw this in the truck even though it wasn't ready. It's a thing that happens. We get very, very angry at my nursery when we see stuff like this. Like, really angry. Look at this little guy. This is a tulip poplar, and I'm gonna try to pronounce the name. I think it's Loriodendron tulipifolia. Loriodendron folia, faria, whatever. So the tulip poplar is pretty neat in the sense that it's a fast grower. This guy is $33.98, and it is, I'm not gonna lift it up by the pot because I learned my lesson from the other guy. It's in a little 3-gallon. So it's in a little 3-gallon pot here. They grow fast. I like the tulip poplar for that reason. It's a quick grower. It's not a poplar per se. It's got some neat leaves. Its seed comes from the flower, so when the flower's done, the seeds, they're not really helicopters, but they're kind of helicopters. It's not like a maple seed, but it does helicopter down. It does fly on the wind, but they're quick growers. It might be in with kind of a yellow fall color, so they are pretty in the fall, and they are a good shade tree. What I would ask you to consider is that the faster a tree grows, typically the more brittle the tree is, right? So as it grows, it doesn't have that condensed fiber to its wood, right? Those fibers are further apart, which make them a little bit more brittle. So with a tulip poplar, you will probably have some twigs and some branches and stuff fall down after a storm. It's not like an oak or a Norway maple or a sugar maple, something like that, that just grows super, super slow. So those fibers are very, very densely packed in there, those spent cells. So just keep that in mind. The faster they're growing the tree, typically, they don't stand up as well to snow and ice load and wind. It is what it is. If it's not properly maintained pruning wise, it will, a lot of those branches will get really heavy, and if they go, heartbreak city. Check these little poopers out. This is a dappled willow. In the old nursery I used to work at, we had a really hard time keeping these in stock because they were so pretty. I mean, if you can check that pink new growth, marbled white variegation to the leaves, just cool. These aren't very thick, very, very tiny graft. And I wanted to show you this, if you can see that. So that is where they grafted this on to some other willow stock. Maybe a weeping willow, maybe a corkscrew willow. And what they're doing is they're trying to get some height out of it in a single leader. From here down, it will continue to grow out, but it won't grow any taller than this. So that dominance has been stopped. The tree will not grow any taller. What will happen is if sun starts hitting this trunk, you got to remember, trees are a business, right? This business has just gone through a merger. Could send out other branches below the graft scar, other branches in order to take care of that market share until this top gets big enough to shade the bottom. So you got to clean the suckers off of these bad boys. I think it's neat. I think it's neat that you guys can see this, because a lot of the times when you see this bud scar, you see the discoloration, and you can actually see where it was split, and that scion, or the top of this, the dappled willow shrub, was then grafted on. So they split it down the middle, they put a little wedge in the scion, and then they slipped it down in there and they tied it up. So kind of cool grafting. I haven't talked about that very much because we hang out at Lowe's, but here you go. And then so from the graft, now you're starting to talk about the height, right? So remember a couple videos ago I was talking about weeping cherries. A lot of what dictates how tall a weeping cherry is going to be is based on where it is on the graft. So this would be considered a high graft dappled willow. Let's see. It says 6 to 10 feet tall, 6 to 10 feet wide. That's what a dappled willow does when it's in shrub form. This has already got 4 feet on that. So now you're looking at 14 feet if you just let this thing go, which I do not suggest you do with a dappled willow. The appeal of a dappled willow is the new growth. Create as much new growth as you can, which means you trim them. That's a dappled willow. This one is $87. It's a little tiny for an $87 anything, but you're not gonna hate it, right? So that would be an investment you could make, and 3 years from now, you're gonna be like, well, it was expensive, but we love it. One of those situations. Look at Lowe's classying up the place with some dianthus and some salvia. You dogs. I don't know if we covered this Last time I was here, I think it was 2 weeks ago. This is the Raspberry Surprise. I think we might have, and it was real heavily budded. Oh, that smells good. I was walking around here trying to figure out what it was that smelled so good, and it was either the marigolds or this stuff. Oh, I like dianthus, but if you look in this display here, see what they did? They put all this Raspberry Surprise with the salvia as a backdrop. Now you're using your noodle. I used to do a lot of displays at a nursery I used to work at. I used to do a lot of displays, and it's just such a nightmare to do because first of all, people ravage your displays like a bunch of savages, just tearing at the place, pulling all your stuff out. And then you also have to hand water them because typically displays weren't under irrigation. They were in an area of high traffic. Irrigation usually isn't in an area of high traffic. So I just think that's neat. Raspberry Surprise dianthus, $9.98. You're not going to be kicking yourself 2 years later when you spend $9.98 on a dianthus that looks like this. Geez Louise, multiple petals. So it's not a single petal like a Fire Witch or a Fire Star dianthus or some of the other dianthus that we've seen on this channel. Wow, look at that. Can you imagine 15 of these guys just drifting through your landscape? Nice. All right, this is kind of neat. Look at this sad little puppy, needs a good home. So this is Intense Geranium. It is normally $10.98, which is gonna take us into the 4th tier, which is gonna make this $7. They are rough. These geraniums are rough. Got these pink flowers, and the cool thing about this Intense Geranium is that when the weather starts to cool off, these green leaves are gonna start turning a little bit more reddish. And I think that's kind of neat for a perennial to give us one last hoorah right before it goes down into the ground and hibernates for a little while, goes to sleepy. I would really like to do something like this because this is about as tall as they get. I mean, that's not very tall at all. This would be great for the front border of something. And the cool thing about geraniums is geraniums, once they start blooming, they just continue blooming and blooming and blooming. I'm a big geranium fan. The perennial geranium, not the stinky ones that old ladies plant. I had somebody mention in a comment in my last video, I'd almost bet there's more than one lily in there. Where? Where's this mysterious lily you're seeing? There might have been, but there is no longer. And not to mention the fact, how many of these things did they sell for $5.48, right? Full retail when they were blooming. I bet you money they only put one in, but I'm not a betting man. They put one in here, they maximized profit, that's exactly what they did. So here's something neat. Remember we saw the pinball wizard and how I just kind of gushed over him for a little while? There's a bunch of dianthus that we had over there. Well, this one looks like it has been used in a game of soccer, maybe. $14.98, which takes us into the 4th tier, which would make this $7. Now, for a named variety in a Monrovia pot for $7, it's worth every penny. So guess who's coming home with me? Remember we saw these dianthus on the last episode? This is the Paint the Town Magenta. And it's a dianthus, it's a single petal dianthus, so it's like those fire stars, like a Fire Witch. But this is Paint the Town Magenta. Now, it's $10.98, which takes us into that 4th tier, which is gonna make these $7. A fantastic deal, especially because this hasn't degraded any, and the only thing it needs done is maybe cut back. Looks like they've got 3 of them, and they're all coming home with me. Just found another pinball wizard.
Keep me guessing, keep me guessing, keep me guessing, keep me guessing. It's like ooh la la, ooh la la. It's not hard to say how I feel. It's like ooh la la, ooh la la.
Okay, so digging around on the bottom rack, I found 4 of these guys, which is a Merit Supreme Hydrangea. So I think what's neat about these is they just need a little bit of drinky poo and they're gonna be fine. $26.98, which is gonna take us into that 5th tier, which makes it 50% off. So, I mean, not too bad. 13 bucks, $13.50, somewhere around there is what you're gonna be walking away with something like this. This is a 1.5 gallon, but I would say it could probably be considered a number 2. That's probably how I would sell it. Just so I didn't have to make a new SKU for a 1.5 gallon, I would sell it as a 2. That wouldn't necessarily be a bad idea. Just remember, in Latin, hydrangea means water vessel, right? They like it de agua. Now I'm gonna have to pass on the hydrangea because I just don't have enough morning sun shielded from the hot afternoon in the way that my house sets. The closest I can do is shade at around 2. So, and that's where the pay it forward bed is. And I just don't have room. I've been setting myself up to pay it forward a little too much. I wanted to talk a little bit about barberry. And speaking in absolutes when you talk about barberry, okay? Every time I mention barberry, somebody always likes to tell me that barberries are invasive. Well, not this barberry. So speaking in absolutes is incorrect because this barberry is sterile. The orange rocket barberry has never been observed producing a flower. And if it doesn't produce a flower, it doesn't produce the seed. It has to have sexual parts present. This has no sexual parts. So therefore, it's not going to be able to become invasive. What you see is pretty much what you get. Now, the orange rocket I love because of its foliage color. Now it does have thorns, and you've heard me say this before, don't plant barberry where you go, you plant barberry where you see. I'll say that 1,000 times. 4 feet tall by 1.5 feet wide. So it's gonna be a columnar barberry. I do like them for their color. It is a fantastic contrast. They look absolutely brilliant in the fall. And this particular one is $12.98. So orange rocket barberry might not be okay in your state because it has a last name like barberry. I listened to a guy in a TED talk about, or some sort of talk, something, and he was using absolutes about butterfly bush. Butterfly bush are invasive. If you're hating on a butterfly bush, man, you gotta go talk to somebody, like somebody professional that can maybe help you through your issues of hatred, because them damn things are beautiful. I don't care what you are, right? I might not like Miley Cyrus, but I'll tell you what, girl is good. You know what I'm saying? Don't hate on the barberry. The barberry is just doing what barberry do, all right? I read something somewhere that said that barberry, the reason it was on the list is because deer won't eat it and it harbors ticks. And the only thing I could think of is, hey, government employee who just said barberry harbor ticks, take your pants off, get all down to your birthday suit, right? And then run through a field filled with native grasses, right? And tell me you don't get ticks in weird places. Go on, I'll wait. Here is a very unique variety of Paul's Gold false cypress. Now this particular false cypress has a unique mutation where it's developed a maple tree right in the center. So this is what's known as a Paul's Gold red maple hybrid. All right, I'm gonna pull this maple tree out of here real quick. Oh my God. Oh guys, you're gonna love this. I'm so glad I hit record before I did this. Whoever grew this Paul's Gold, I know you're listening. Shame on you. I know what you did. You cut this right below where this foliage was, and then it regrew. See? True character is what you do when no one's looking. You failed. Oh, get this out of here. Nope. I'm gonna make an absolute mess. I'm gonna feel bad about it. Because the last thing these overworked, underpaid folks need. There we go, we got her now. Oh, this thing's dug in like an Alabama tick. Look at that, is what laziness breeds. Jeez Louise. I'll throw that away for him. So now I'm gonna have to repot this. What am I doing? What am I doing? I do not work here. That is about the right height, I think. You think I've done this a time or two? Okay, no worse for wear. I'm a lot dirtier. That displaced so much soil. Moral compass check passed. Except for all this dirt. I'm a jerk. All right, check this bad boy out. Look at that thing. Look at that thing. That was in a pot because see where they pruned it? Somebody went in, they took their pruners, and they just snipped this bad boy right there, right at where the level was. And then it reflushed, and that's what it does every single time. You are not going to be able to defeat this thing when it's sitting in a nursery filled with a bunch of fertilizer and proper watering. You're not going to do it. So it needs to be taken out. And they just got lazy. All right, here is the scorecard. So I have 2 of the Pinball Wizard for $7. Then I get the Paint the Town Magenta Dianthus for $7. I got 3 bags of potting soil for my window boxes for $17 a piece. Jeez Louise. And then I got this little jerk for free because I pulled it out of the pot. And then I showed the cashier, hey, I dug this out of the pot. And then I tried to get these for $4 a piece. She told me no. So, but I got a free plant out of the deal. And I think it would be fun to just plant this guy in just somewhere. I just plant him somewhere. A little maple. I think that'd be fun. I think that would be a cool story for this tree to tell my grandkids one day. So that's what we'll do. My name's Stuart Moore. Thank you very much for letting me into your home to talk about plants.